Did you know that there's a particular type of ADHD that often flies under the radar? And I'm talking so far under the radar that people don't find out about it until way into adulthood. That's what we're going to talk about today. I want to make sure that this does not fly under the radar for you, right? I want to make sure you know all about this type of ADHD or this type of ADHD and what you can do about it if you suspect you might be dealing with it. I'm also going to share with you why I'm doing these quotes, okay? Now, we're going to dive right into my notes, no funny business, just straight into the good stuff. But before we do, one quick disclaimer, this video is not medical advice, okay? It is strictly for informational purposes only, all right? Now, let's dive right in. So before we start, my name is Matt. I'm a therapist in private practice. I own a small practice in New York City. We specialize in the treatment of ADHD, right? We're very passionate about ADHD, especially educating people on ADHD, which is why we're making this video. The practice I own is called Progress Therapy. It's stylized as PRGRS. This video is not about our practice, but if you do want to check it out, there's a link to our website down below, okay? Now, we are talking about inattentive ADHD. All right, that is the topic of this video. That is the type that flies under the radar. Now, I'm going to skip ahead a little bit in the notes. So the first thing is, why am I making these quotes? What is a type of ADHD? The first thing I have to mention is that there's no neat and clean category that ADHD can fit into perfectly. In the real world, ADHD presents in different ways for different people. It's quite complex, right? So I want to make sure people know that. But when it comes to the current way in which ADHD is identified and diagnosed, we use this book or this kind of, it's called a statistical manual called the DSM-5. The most recent version is called the DSM-5-TR, text revision, but that's not so important for this video. And inside of that manual, there is categories or types of ADHD, right? And that is where the types come from. So in the real world, it does not play out that cleanly, but according to the DSM, which is what we currently use to make the diagnosis, there are different types, and that's why I'm using quotes, okay? So with that out of the way, let's talk about those different types. Now, this is in no particular order. Let's look at the middle one here because that's the focus of today's video. One of the types, right, types or presentations is another way to think about it, is the predominantly inattentive type, all right? And that's going to be the focus. The other one is called predominantly hyperactive or impulsive, all right? And then there's the combined type right over here on the left, which is having a bit of both, all right? So again, in the real world, it does not get played out perfectly like in these clean, neat categories, but it's how we have it categorized in the DSM, all right? So let's unpack the predominantly inattentive type because this is the one that often flies under the radar. All right. Now, the best way I think to go through this is to actually go through the DSM-5 criteria verbatim, okay? And so that's what we're going to go through. I have it here on the screen. I'll read it for us, and then I'll explain some of the things that might not be, might not make sense at first glance. All right. So number one is, again, I don't have the whole manual right here for us to look at. It'd be too much, but there's different criteria for the different types. We're going to go through the criteria for the inattentive type. All right. So what does it say here? 6 or more of the following symptoms have persisted for at least 6 months to a degree that is inconsistent with the developmental level and that negatively impacts directly on social and academic/occupational activities. So in other words, the criteria that we're going to go through, we're going to go through them together in just a second. It says that we need to have 6 or more of them, right, that have persisted for at least 6 months that are inconsistent with developmental level, right? Meaning that they're, not better explained just through kind of the age someone's at, right? And that negatively impact, right, have direct negative impacts on social, academic, occupational activities. So it has to be, another way to think about that is it deteriorating quality of life in those different areas? And now, again, it's not perfect, but this is what we have to go off of. And of course, you can tell that's a bit subjective. And there's a bit of a note down here. It says the symptoms are not solely a manifestation of oppositional behavior, defiance, hostility, or failure to understand tasks or instructions. So essentially what this is saying is that these symptoms cannot be better explained by that, right? Oppositional behavior, hostility, these kinds of things. All right. So let's go into the different criteria and see what those are all about. All right. The first one is often fails to give close attention to details or make careless mistakes in schoolwork, at work, or during other activities. Okay. Examples: overlooking or missing details, work is inaccurate. All right. Another: often has difficulty sustaining attention in tasks or play activities. Examples: has difficulty remaining focused during lectures, conversations, lengthy reading. Another: often does not seem to listen when spoken to directly, right? Mind seems elsewhere, even in the absence of any obvious distraction, right? Moving on. Another one, letter D: often does not follow through on instructions and fails to finish schoolwork, chores, or duties in the workplace. Examples: starts tasks but quickly loses focus and is easily sidetracked. Letter E: often has difficulty organizing tasks and activities. Examples: difficulty managing sequential tasks, difficulty keeping materials and belongings in order, messy, disorganized work. Letter F: often avoids, dislikes, or is reluctant to engage in tasks that require sustained mental effort. Letter G, we have a couple more, or a few more. Often loses things necessary for tasks or activities. Examples: school materials, pencils, books, wallets, these kinds of things. Letter H is often easily distracted by extraneous stimuli. Okay, let's move on to letter I. Is often forgetful in daily activities, doing chores, running errands, this kind of thing. Okay, now those are the criteria that we are working with. And so what the DSM is saying, that if we have 6 or more that have persisted, right, for 6 months and are not better explained by other issues or diagnoses, right, then that is one of the ways in which we begin to make this diagnosis. Now, it's really important that we don't just read this and start diagnosing ourselves. This really does have to be done by a mental health professional, someone who's familiar with ADHD, because as you can tell, right, almost every person can resonate with some of these symptoms some of the time. But just because we resonate with some of them some of the time, or even all of them some of the time, it does not mean we have ADHD. Okay, but that is the criteria verbatim taken from the DSM-5. All right. Now, if we move on here, again, once again, I really want to make sure this is driven home clearly. ADHD does not show up that cleanly, right? You don't read those criteria and go, oh yeah, every single one, that's me, that's exactly it. And then, life is a lot more complex than that, all right? So people's experiences differ. Even people who have inattentive ADHD, everyone's experience is slightly different and unique to them, and that is normal, okay? Now, why does this particular type of ADHD get overlooked? Well, if we look at some of this criteria here, right? Let's look at D. Just pick a couple random ones. Often does not follow through on instructions and fails to finish schoolwork, right? This would be fairly quiet, right? This is not the stereotypical disruptive, squirming in the seat, can't sit still, always interrupting, right? Very loud. This is very quiet and can fall through the radar. Let's just go to A, for example. Often fails to give close attention to details or makes careless mistakes. Again, it kind of is a very quiet thing that can happen under the surface or under the radar, right? And people can often miss it. It's not necessarily obvious and quote unquote loud, right? Where people can kind of see it and observe it. All right. Let's just pick one more. F, often avoiding or disliking or reluctant to engage in tasks that require sustained mental effort. Again, not necessarily disruptive and outward, but it can be very inward, and in some senses, it can be kind of private, right, where people don't necessarily see that is happening. All right, so that's one of the major reasons, right? It's not this outward kind of very loud and very obvious, visible kind of presentation. The other thing is people build coping skills that can hide it, right? And these coping skills are not always good, right? Or I should say, these coping skills are not always effective, right? In the sense that they help people manage it well. But people do find ways to manage. And so what ends up happening is people end up struggling silently, but the struggle is real and it is constant. Right? And it just happens in such a way that no one sees it. And when we see our adult clients who've dealt with ADHD their whole life, especially this inattentive type, you will hear them describe dealing with things like this, finding ways to manage it or kind of hide it But the ways they've come up with, although they may be effective in masking it, they take a real toll on them, right? This could be, for example, staying up all night long to get work done that they avoided for a while, right? Or all sorts of things, kind of like that. No one sees it, but the struggle is real. Okay, and that's true. And so we see these two things, right? It's not outward, it's not obvious, so people don't always catch it. And then number two, those coping skills come in and people are really able to find a way to keep it beneath the surface, but struggle silently for a while, okay? So what happens if we're dealing with inattentive ADHD and we're not getting the help that we could get, right? Or help that would help us manage this more effectively? Well, number one is, I already mentioned this, silent suffering, right? We're working incredibly hard just to keep our head above the water. This is painful, right? That's one. And these are just a few, right? There's tons of issues that happen. Self-esteem takes a real big hit, right? We see people concluding that something is wrong with them, right? There's nothing else but just personality flaw. Something's wrong with me in particular, that I can't get my stuff together. And so self-esteem really takes a hit. A lot of shame, right? Kind of tied into self-esteem, right? We're inevitably going to deal with consequences, living with ADHD, right? There's things that we're going to deal with, whether it be something as extreme as losing a job or not making it through school, or it could be something like just getting talked to, repeatedly by teachers or bosses or whatever the case may be. Regardless of the type of consequence, there's going to be, and people are going to deal with shame and guilt, right? Feelings of those things. We're going to see relationships take a hit, right? We're going to see employment take a hit at times, schoolwork, these kinds of things. Now, again, it might not be the most extreme consequence, but even small consequences repeated over and over again take a real big toll on people, right? And so these are just some of the costs that people are paying who are struggling and suffering, right, with this particular, any type of ADHD can cause these issues, but this one in particular can be a very quiet one, okay? Now, importantly, what do we do about it? Number one, you are already doing something, which is educating yourself. And that's first and foremost. We need to be aware that inattentive ADHD is even a thing. And then we need to begin to understand what exactly it is. Okay, that's step number one. And of course, there's more than this, but I think just to get us started, learning about it is great. And you're doing that now. And then number two would be to find someone, a professional who's well-trained, who understands ADHD, who can then begin to help you either get the testing that you require, the treatment that you require, both, right, to kind of get this, to get the help that you need that could really help you, right? Because ADHD, all the different types, right? There are ways we can manage it. There's ways we can begin to live more effectively, even with ADHD. And so there is help to be had, and that help can really, really improve someone's quality of life. And so those are two ways in which we can begin to do something about this ADHD if we suspect we might have it. All right. Now, that is mostly what I wanted to share with you today. I hope you found this video helpful. I hope you learned something. And again, if you're interested in checking out our practice, we are licensed in the state of New York. The website is down below. Other than that, I hope you have a great rest of your day, and I will see you in the next video.